Hello, my name is Hatu. Welcome to another Asian Agribiz podcast. Today is Akil Tan, our regional correspondent from the Philippines, talks to Peter Fisher, president of Aviagen Asia, about sustainability in broiler production. What exactly does it entail? And is it achievable?
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for taking time to join us in this podcast.
Good morning, Isa, and yes, pleased to be here and really looking forward to having this chat with you.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, before we get into the nitty-gritty, can we start with a short introduction about yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to do. Peter Fisher, I'm a South African by nationality. I joined Aviagen only in April this year. Prior to that, I was based in Europe for more than a decade, and I worked in the animal nutrition business. Worked across various countries and areas. Actually, I'm a farm kid born and raised, so the animal production industry has always been close to me. And yep, it's a new opportunity, and it's for me the exciting thing is we're in a growth market. I think Asia, with so many countries, so many people, this is where it's going to happen. I think this is the place to be for us.
Well, in a sense, welcome to Asia.
Thank you very much. Now I'm looking forward to staying for quite some time.
Okay. Sustainability is a buzzword in the animal protein industry, and you hear about it a lot these days. But I think many producers are still having some misunderstanding or misconceptions about what sustainability means and what it entails. What we'd like to focus on today is how genetic companies like Aviagen is addressing the call for sustainable broiler production, because I think that's one of the things that are happening now in the broiler industry. So let me start by asking you, what are the challenges faced by the broiler industry with regards to environmental, economic, and social sustainability? What is driving the move towards sustainability?
Excellent. No, thanks for that. I'm going to start off with making a very bold statement and saying sustainability simply is good for business. If we look at reducing our business costs through greater efficiencies, innovations, and solutions, it's valued by our customers. It builds reputation, it builds your brand, and also in conjunction with people working for the company, I think it's one of those things that build morale. And it's one of the major reasons that companies are moving towards sustainability. I think typically we've always looked at various elements of sustainability, but more and more industries across the board are looking at it in a much more holistic way. And this is what is really driving it. And we're looking at it basically not only for Aviagen, but I think across the entire broiler industry. And if I can break it down, I'll sort of just take you through it. First one, we're looking at economic sustainability. And basically, it means increased profitability across industries and also making, very importantly, the products more affordable for our end users. And the good thing was making a profit means you actually have money in your pocket that you can contribute to support sustainability projects. The second one is social sustainability, or what we will call ethics, where it talks about caring for people and caring for our animals. And at Aviagen, we really care for our animals, for our birds, and making sure that we meet all their health and welfare needs. Similarly, when it comes to people and employees, are we a company that can give meaningful careers to our people and also take care of their health and safety? So we care not only for our customers, but I think also for the communities that we serve. When it comes to environmental sustainability, I think we're all well aware, and the COP26 is now going on. It's about taking care not only of our planet now, but also for the generations to come. And we believe that by strengthening these efficiencies, it leads to the preservation of our natural resources for the generations that will still and must still use it. When we start looking at these three pillars with economic, social, environmental, they all tie to each other. You cannot touch the one and not touch the others. And if you make a contribution to the one, it basically has a ripple effect that goes through the entire process.
Okay, so it's basically a holistic thing. You cannot just say we'll focus just on economic sustainability without really looking at, say, environmental and social as well.
You're 100% right. You've got to take the big picture into consideration. You've got to look at it in a very balanced, I would call like a balanced scorecard. It's about the planet, it's about profit, but it's also about people. And I think whatever you do, you have to consider this ramification on any of these other pillars as to what you do, because you could purely go for an economic sustainability, but you could have consequences that you have not intended to have. So I think this is where it's very important to have this holistic approach. Absolutely.
Okay. I saw the Aviagen poster online, and where it says, over time, Aviagen has improved performance. At the same time, it has reduced water use, less energy, less land, feed used in broiler production. So you've been able to do that. At the same time, you improved the performance and you've reduced your overall footprint. So can you elaborate a little bit on how that was done? How did Aviagen do this?
Absolutely. And I think, again, this is sort of another example of having a little bit this holistic approach. And that's basically through a process where we looked at, and still looking at what I would call balanced breeding goals. So in other words, that you're not chasing only one goal. So we're able to select, of course, birds on very strong performance. In other words, how they grow, how little feed they use, but also looking at health and welfare. So not only on the actual performance, but also on the efficiency and taking care of health and well-being. Now, I think here again, to put it a little bit more clear, is we focus a lot on improving feed conversion ratio. So basically, that's what it means, is taking a kilo of feed and trying to turn it into as close to a kilo of meat, of course, and you will never do that 100%. But basically, it means we reduce wastage along the entire process. And to give you some numbers, so every year we improve, and you'll typically hear in broiler speak, they talk about 2 points of feed conversion ratio. But to give you a little bit of a sense of what that means, it means that every year we can reduce our CO2 footprint by 1%. And we use every year 15 to 20 grams feed less per kilo of live weight. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but compound this, and you start looking at the past 15 years, is basically we need half a kilo less feed to arrive at the same 2.5 kilo broiler. And that starts getting to some big numbers. Now, to give you an idea, if you look at the global population, it basically means with this efficiency that we free up, if you wish, about 660,000 hectares of land every year, which can be used either for other crops, land conservation, what have you. Every year, we're giving back and say, hey, we don't need to plant it. We can use it for nature conservation, other types of crops. One of the additional knock-on effects, if they are using less feed, of course, is we also reduce, very, very importantly, some of the outputs. It's not only about the input, it's what's coming out again. And we look at about over that time period, a 20% reduction also in the nitrates and phosphates that come in through the manure into the land. And we know this is typically what contributes to water eutrophication and basically damaging resources. So, and of course, the other hot buzzword, what does it do to greenhouse gases? Again, we're also lowering that by about 15% over this period. So in a nutshell, by focusing on these various elements, but with this drive on efficiency, we not only get the bird more efficient, but we also reduce the negative outputs that it has, and we use less resources. So again, touching on various, I would say, goals that you would think is in conflict, it's all just interlinked.
Okay, you mentioned the improvement in feed conversion ratio. And these days, feed cost is so high. It remains such a big issue, not just in broiler production, but I think basically in all animal production. So it's an issue not just cost-wise, but in terms of efficiency. So there's been a lot of interest in the use of alternative feed raw materials lately because of problems with supply of corn and feed wheat and soya as well. So when you're using alternative feed materials, how would this affect broiler production and sustainability?
Yeah. So no, it's a good question, because I think if you look at we are we are shipping feed raw materials all over the world. So, things are produced in one continent or one country, and it is shipped at great cost to another. And I think soya is just one of many. But if we use soya, as an example, companies like Aviagen, or specifically Aviagen, are putting quite a lot of effort into looking at alternatives for soya. And I think, on the surface, yes, there are alternatives, but they do come with certain impacts on how the bird grows. So we do a lot of trials, nutritional trials, to see if we use alternatives, how does it affect the efficiency of the bird and also the health and well-being. And again, we are not alone, because you look at many, many companies in the animal nutrition space that's developing technologies to use these feed raw materials a lot better. You can think about heat treatment, you can think about enzyme technologies. So of course, we also look far and wide at technologies to assist us in making sure that we can consistently use these raw materials, of course, to the benefit of the animal, benefit to the environment, and of course, for us as both customers and consumers, because come tonight, we are all consumers and having hopefully a nice dinner.
Aviagen comprises many different breeds and strains. So how are you making the breeds more sustainable, and what are the traits that you are focusing on?
Good question. So I think to recap a little bit of what I said, is one of our big pushes is to use less feed and less water. And I mentioned, that we are using 0.5 kilo of less feed to get to a bird nowadays of 2.5 kilos versus 15 years ago. One of the other things is we're using 1 liter less water. So again, we've managed to, I think, significantly reduce. And we have to keep in mind, we are continuing. This is a continuous process. This is not something that you stop and start. I think for us is what comes up is, how do we manage to do it? I think one of the things you need to have is, of any successful breeding program, is you need to have quite a lot of depth. And one of those is, for Aviagen, we've got more than 30 lines, what I would call chicken lines, that we've got access to that genetic pool. So you keep that diversity, and from that you then can select what it is you need fit for purpose, be it in a specific part of the world, specific environmental conditions. And so access to a good gene pool, I think, is one. Quite focus on what are the goals you want to achieve. And then I think I also mentioned earlier is having these balanced breeding goals, that you not only go for one specific attribute, but that you're looking not only at efficiency and performance, but also welfare and health. Because by doing that, you allow the animal to grow well. We use a lot less medication. I think, as I've said in the beginning, it's simply just the thing to do from a business point of view. It just makes sense. And ultimately, again, we are consumers. We are exposed to food that is good and healthy. And I think this is one of the other parts that's very good. And then, of course, this is something that happens over many years. I think we've got to be very clear. This is an investment in time. This is not something where we launch a new model, and I'm not going to use any brands, but we look at the mobile phone companies that manufacture, and every year there's a new model with fantastic new features. We've got incremental improvements year on year on year, and we've got to be very, very clear that we stick to those objectives, that we stick to that strategy to ultimately provide this long-term solutions.
Okay. It's been said that genetic development cannot always be positive. There's trade-offs. So while there would be some improvements, there might also be some negative consequences. So could these consequences affect sustainability? And if yes, how are you addressing them?
Quite correct. I think if it's an uncontrolled process, this could happen. You could have what we would call unintended consequences. And I think it brings us back to our balanced breeding approach, where we've got very clearly defined traits or characteristics that we are selecting for. And as much as we are looking for performance characteristics, so good growth, the good sort of development of breast meat yield, etc., those type of characteristics. The other one from a sustainability point of view is to see, is it done with less feed and less water? So again, focusing on less use of natural resources. And then the third one, which is very, very important, is good welfare. So we are looking at raising birds that are healthy, that don't have leg problems, that have very good immune systems. So between those, what I would call very broad pillars, between welfare, sustainability, and performance characteristics, I think we strike a healthy balance between those different traits and without inviting any negative consequences in through the back door. But again, it's a continuous process. You learn as you test. And I think that's why for us, broad genetic lines, continuous work, measuring, and we'll get into that a bit later, but being very accurate in what we measure, that we avoid making costly mistakes. And costly doesn't necessarily mean dollars or euros or whatever. It means to the environment, to welfare as well.
Okay, what can we expect then in broiler genetics development from now on? I mean, particularly regarding sustainability. Is it possible to develop a disease-resistant breed?
No, I think it's a question that is asked across many species. Can we genuinely provide a disease-resistant animal? And I think, to be quite frank, I don't think it's possible at this point in time to breed an animal that is totally disease resistant. However, I think where a lot of push and drive is by using genetics and genetic selection to get animals with good, what I would call immune systems, well-functioning immune systems, good gut development, because we have to remember that they're also a function of what they eat. Together with, I think, a lot of work on nutrition that we do and also management, is that we get closer to the point where we basically use medication only when needed and not on a continuous basis. So if you ask me, what does success look like? Success looks like that for every kilo of meat that we produce over a period of time, we would use less and less and less medication to keep these animals in good health. Disease resistant, probably by itself not, but less and less use of medication through better management, better nutrition, better genetics, definitely. To get to the point, what can we expect for the future? And it's a question we are often asked by our customers. What's new, what's coming? I think we're living in a world with great expectations. Slow and steady does it, because we're dealing with a living creature, with living organisms. And if you look at where our research facilities in the UK and the US are, we continuously focus on this balanced breeding approach, and the genetic diversity. So we want the diversity, but we also want this genetic approach. So we are talking on a year-on-year basis. However, the tools that we employ become more and more sophisticated, and that makes us more and more accurate. And I'll just sort of give you a bit of a feel for it. It's the use of genomics to get a lot more accurate. Now, again, genomics can be a scary word, but genomics is basically the study of genes, how they interact with each other and how they interact with the environment. So getting a better understanding of how genomics work, very, very important. Then, of course, on a more practical basis, improvement on feed efficiency, we mentioned that, where we use sort of the what I would call the use of the feed station technology, where we can much more accurately measure what the birds are eating and how they're performing, but in an environment that is very close to a production environment, because we need to understand how they will perform, as the people that will be farming with them. One of the other things we are using is imaging technology, three-dimensional imaging technology, to really have a look inside a live bird to see how muscle development is happening. Also very important, of course, good muscles need good bones to carry them. That's our skeleton, our structure. So we can really have a look at, from a health point of view, are they also developing well, and is there anything we need to be aware of? And I think then the other one that I want to mention is also multi-environment selection. Again, it's a big word, but we know that the world is big and people are farming everywhere, from some very cold to some very hot regions, from some very advanced type of farming to, I would say, a little bit more local conditions. So we are also looking at these different environments, how our birds are performing, and then selecting to get the right characteristics to use in those environments so that we can breed a bird that our customers can actually farm with in their conditions. So those are a little bit the techniques we are using, or technology that we're using, to bring us a little bit closer to making sure that we consistently every year can show an advance in the performance. And I said performance from a welfare, efficiency, sustainability point of view, really a balanced scorecard of characteristics.
So basically, in a nutshell, Aviagen is going for balanced breeding.
I think, and that is sort of the call to arms for us, is to use a balanced approach, because I think as custodians, if you wish, of such a large part of the food chain, which is so important for us, those commitments, if you look at it, where we look at food safety, biodiversity, balanced breeding, management and transparency in communication, that's who we are, that's what we have to do, and that's how we have to breed our birds as well. It's like juggling about 5 different balls in the air, but that is what we do, and that's what we're good at. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for taking time sitting down with me today and talking about sustainability, Peter.
Absolutely, Azaz. Thank you very much, and was lovely talking to you. And yeah, at any time, any questions, happy to help answer or provide the correct information. I think it's just important as a significant player in this industry that we get this message out. It's not only for us, it's for our customers, and it's for our consumers ultimately as well.
As you have heard, sustainable broiler production is already here, but entering it continues to be an ongoing balancing act of economic, environmental, and social components. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Please visit www.asian-agribiz.com to download this podcast and to get more information about Asia's animal protein industry. This is Hatu, hoping you will join us again in our future podcast.